What is a man? What is a man? What does it mean to be a man? That is the question that very few people know, especially these days. So I'm going to go down a pretty deep rabbit hole, and I'm probably not going to unpack everything in this one video. But it's a question that I have asked myself and deeply meditated on over these last few months. Specifically, it was sparked by a conversation and a retreat, shall we say, a men's retreat, where that question was posed to all the attendees. And it's quite interesting what everyone had to say when we had a sharing circle, and every man present had to bring forward what they feel is a man, their definition of what a man is. And of course you heard some of the more mainstream accepted versions of what a man is. He's strong, he's stoic, he's a provider, he's a protector. And there were a few other interesting takes on what a man is too, which I'm not going to get into now because those are the private matters of these other men who attended there. But I'll share mine in a few moments. For me, what I said when it was my turn is that a man is in his heart, no matter what happens around him. And it took me a long time to get to that place. And, this was not the first time where I sort of wrestled with that question myself. I've healed a lot of my traumas, a lot of my emotions, a lot of my deep-seated fears that I've had, both from my childhood and apparently also from pre-birth. And that was something that I realize now greatly affected how I see myself as a man and how I see other men too in this world. So of course, in the beginning of my journey of self-reflection and inner healing was, I've had the same mainstream accepted versions of what a man is, and but throughout my journey, specifically with the help of these retreats, I've realized that the notion and the programming of what a man is was first installed by my father. And that's the same with everyone, whether you're a man or you're a woman. Your first exposure to what a man is and what he's not is your father. So just for now, just take a quick minute and think about the archetype of your father. How was he behaving? Did you even have a father when you were growing up? And I realized that in my subconscious, I had adopted both the good traits and the bad traits of my dad. And I was living them out, although from a perspective where I was sort of on the opposite side of the spectrum. He was over here, and I realized that, through my family history and whatever, he did what he did, and I didn't want to be that. So I went to the opposite side of the spectrum, of the pendulum, so to speak, right? But I was still connected to him. See, everything I did, everything I was trying to be as a man was in opposition to what I learned to what a man is and what he's not, and how a man behaves. Until I realized I can let go of that pendulum. And I can define for myself what a man is. I can literally write my own programming, my own story, even though, stories can be very tricky if you know what I mean. But I can write my own version of who I want to be as a man and who I want to be to others both to men and to women. So here's the list that I have so far. In his spine. A man is in his spine. How many spineless men do we have walking around on this planet? Or plane, whatever you prefer. Right? How many spineless men do we know of? Do we see on TV every single day? Do we see on social media? Do we see in the government? A man has a spine. He does what is right, even if everyone thinks it's wrong. He knows what's right. Okay? He knows what's morally right. What is the moral thing to do that is not up for debate? And it takes a spine. It takes guts. It takes a spine. Standing in your spine. Feeling your spine. And the power that comes with that. And then, of course, in the heart. Centered in the heart. Standing in his spine. A man is calm. Now, of course, life throws all kinds of things at us that may ruffle some feathers, that bring up emotions, that trigger us. But if you have disconnected your buttons that people can push, if you have healed your fears and your traumas, at least, the majority of them, so that stuff when it comes up no longer triggers you, and you're not reactive to what comes towards you, then you can be calm. A man is present. Present, not thinking all the time, not, pulling up memories from the past or planning things ahead of the future or fearing about the future or worrying about what happened in the past. A man is present in the now with whoever he's dealing with. If you're in a conversation, don't think about the next thing you're going to say. A man is present and he listens. And then he lets, if we're talking about a conversation, he lets the other person finish, then takes a moment, and then, whatever he needs to say, wants to say, then say it without cutting off anyone. A man has tamed and mastered the mind, emotions, and actions. Now, of course, those are all, very big cans of worms. All of these require, several videos, obviously. But mastered the mind, that was a big one for me. And I'm not there yet fully. But I've realized through these, inner reflections and through these retreats that the mind is an incredibly complex yet surprisingly simple labyrinth once you really unpack it. And you can't unpack it unless you look at your fears directly and face your fears head on. And I'll probably make a video and certainly a Substack post on that that night when I faced my existential fear. It was the scariest moment of my life. But it freed me. It freed my mind from being locked inside a mental cage of fear. Next, a man breathes deeply, always. A deep breath. Now, we don't realize how important the breath is. I certainly didn't, especially as I was still very much in my fear response of dealing with life. I wasn't breathing, and if I was breathing, then I was very shallowly breathing. But breath is life, just like water is life. We are water, we are breath, we are air, and we are water primarily. And when you breathe deeply, that obviously helps with calming the mind and staying present. A man is a leader that others want to be around and follow. Notice that others want to be around and want to follow. Not because he's being propped up by media or, social networks or whatever the case may be. there's a presence around him. Even though he may not be in a leadership position. But I guess it goes back to being in your spine, which, you could translate also into confidence. Knowing your core, knowing who you are, and standing in your spine and in your heart. And if there's a situation that calls upon leadership and no one else is stepping up, you feel fine standing and stepping up into that position. And if you make a mistake, well, you can always apologize and you can always own up to your mistakes, which was a big one for me that I had to overcome. I was also afraid of making mistakes, and how am I going to look if I make a mistake, and what if other people get hurt because of my mistakes? So I was not taking action, not positive action for myself, because I was afraid I would make mistakes. A man knows and sees the brain/mind as an auxiliary tool that is only to be used when necessary. That is the real, shall we say, order where it should be, the brain. Okay? The brain is an amazing servant, but a terrible master. That's what Albert Einstein said, over a century ago. And we have created a society that worships the servant. Right? Everything is about mind and cerebral and mental action. Where is the heart in our society? Where is the heart in our world? Love doesn't even have a definition in the legal dictionary. It doesn't exist. Okay? So that alone should tell you something. Knows and sees the brain mind as an auxiliary tool that is only to be used when necessary. I was completely using my mind to live life. I was using my mind to feel my emotions because my heart was completely blocked. My heart was blocked by trauma and fear and sadness and anger and anxiety. So it's an auxiliary tool. That's it. When you need it, the brain is great at keeping us alive and identifying danger. That's really all it's designed to do. And yet we, live our life from the auxiliary engine. Think of it like this, okay? So an airplane has this auxiliary engine with which you can taxi the plane, right? But you can't fly with that auxiliary engine. It runs the lights, it runs the AC, and I think it also is used for taxiing the plane. That's it. So we are running our life with that auxiliary engine. Whereas we have the real engine, the real power is right here in the heart. Right? But we don't know that because the heart is usually blocked by trauma and fear and all kinds of other negative emotions, which no one is exempt from, right? There's very few people on the planet that don't go through trauma, especially in childhood years from 0 to 6 or 7 years old. A man is the I am and just is. Now this is, this goes into a way deep of a rabbit hole, but a man essentially knows that he has a direct connection to whatever he identifies as God, as source, as the impersonal being that created and continues to create the universe, all dimensions. So it's a knowing that a man is part of that consciousness, that all-encompassing consciousness that created everything and continues to create everything. And that, for some people, that takes a lifetime to realize. For some people never realize it. And of course, it comes with facing your fears, right? Who are you really? And at some point, you're going to realize that you're not who you think you are. Who you think you are, most likely, is a mental construct based upon all of your past experiences, both good and bad. Think about that. Who you think you are is a total sum of all your past experiences from birth to right now. It's an egoic structure. It's an image that was created in your mind. A lot of people call it the ego. Although I think that's a bit too simplistic, putting it too simplistically. And it's all subconscious, unfortunately. So there are certain plants, obviously, with which you can go into your subconscious and examine some of these structures. Are they serving you? Some of them, yeah, they might be serving you. But most of the time, those structures are not serving you. And they're creating patterns and habits and actions in your own life that you don't like. Because they were installed when you didn't have a conscious mind yet. You were still a baby or you were still a toddler, Anywhere from birth to 6 or 7 years old. Everything that happened during that time was directly installed in your subconscious and is running programs. Think of it like a computer. It's very much like a computer. And this is the last one that, my teacher brought forward when he shared it during that circle. He said to him, a man is a platform from which other people can grow from. Think about that. Feel that. A man is a platform from which other people can grow from. I mean, if I had a mic, I would drop it right now. But when he said that, that floored me. Because that completes the circle. It encompasses everything that, I said and all the other men said too. Because in order to be a platform for other people to grow from, you're going to have first of all, you're going to have to be completely healed. Completely heal yourself. You have to know who you are. And you have to not only have done all that work, but know enough to help others do the same work. Have the experience to teach others how to live like that, how to, look at your fears and deal with your anxieties and, dismantle these old programs that no longer serve you. A platform for other people to grow from. And then naturally, when these other people grow from that platform, they become better versions of themselves. And then they can become platforms for other people to grow from. And so it creates this ripple effect, right? Throughout generations, where we continue to improve and upgrade and up-level each other. Because we're all healing. And that, my friends, I think is the reason why mankind is in such a, shithole right now, on every level and every sense of the word, because we have continuously ignored our emotions, our traumas, generation after generation after generation. And we're not looking at ourselves deeply in the mirror and saying, you know what? The life that I'm creating for myself and for my family is not what I want it to be. Changing things on the outside doesn't work. And if it does work, it only works temporarily and, for a short time. So I'm going to have to look inside myself. What's inside myself that is causing my reality to hurt myself and hurt others around me? Because at the end of the day, and this is verifiable, quantum science and psychology, we are creating our experience of life every single second. So when something happens in our reality that we don't like, we caused that one way or another. We caused it. Now, of course, there are certain things outside of ourselves, on the planetary scale that we can't directly affect because it's a collective consciousness kind of thing. But guess why the collective consciousness has been, is the way it is? Because we're not doing this kind of work. We're not looking at ourselves. We're not looking deeply inside of ourselves. And we're saying, okay, how can I heal myself from all the trauma that not only I was exposed to, but my entire ancestral lineage was exposed to? Okay? So some of these emotions that are continuously coming up for you and that don't make sense, and you have these random anxieties, for example, which was a big part for me, these random anxieties out of nowhere, they might be a program stored in your DNA from your ancestors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 generations past that no one in your lineage has looked at and healed. And so it just gets passed on to the next generation, right? And then each generation, accumulates more trauma. Life's been very difficult on this planet for a long time, from what we know. And there we are, So we're just these unconscious trauma machines walking around, completely unconscious. But once we start looking at ourselves and once we start the internal healing process, that's when a lot of things start shifting very rapidly. So anyway, that's my rant today on what a man is. And this is an ongoing process for me. So I'll continue to update you guys on all that. So anyway, thanks for listening, and I hope you're doing well out there. So start looking within. Love you.